Hi class, we are going to go over what we did yesterday, or what was it, Tuesday, basically making masks and how to kind of block and reveal the mask. We kind of took Rey's head and we melded it onto Luke Skywalker, so I'm going to show you how to do that again. Once again, I really like to use the quick selection tool. I find it very easy to make my selections really quick. It's not going to be able to do as fine a job on the hair, but for the most part, I'm just looking to grab her face. I mean, when I say the hair, I mean these strings here, but it'll do a good enough job grabbing the majority of what I want. So I'm just going to click and drag up to get my selection, and that's pretty good. And I'm going to grab the ear here just by clicking and dragging again. And remember, if you want to minus from a selection here, you can just, and I might make my brush a little smaller here by using my left bracket. Just hold the Option key down to minus parts if there's things that you don't like. You can always zoom in too by Command plus to kind of get a finer look at your selection. And I'm using the space bar to kind of look around. And I think for the most part, little part of the ear here, so I'm going to go make this a little smaller with my bracket, my left bracket, and hold my Option down, see if I can get a little tighter around the ear there. And I might even go smaller here with that left bracket again so I can get in tighter here. And I'm just clicking, holding that Option key down and just kind of getting a little bit tighter around the ear there. So that looks pretty good. I'm pretty satisfied with that. I'm going to zoom back out. And I'm going to go ahead and put a mask on. And the mask is, if you see me pointing right down here, is the thing that looks like a camera. And why the masks, I'm going to go ahead and click that. And you'll notice that it created a silhouette on Rey here. And if I hold my Option key down and click the silhouette, you'll see the mask that was created here. But the best thing about a mask is that you can reveal things that bring them back or take away. Simply by using your brush. You do need to make sure that you are on the mask. You can either be on her or the mask, but in order to use this ability to block or bring back parts of the image, you need to make sure you're on the mask. That's essential. So if you have the color black selected, that will block anything. So if I grab my brush, which is B on my keyboard, I kind of got a big brush there, so I'll use my left bracket to make it a little smaller. And so B blocks. So if I start to paint now, it'll block her out, which is kind of one of the reasons the mask is cool. But if I change this chip here to white, just by hitting X on my keyboard and moving it to the foreground, now it will reveal. So if I start to paint now, it'll bring back parts of the image, which is great. That's what makes masks powerful. So if I zoom in a little bit on her and say, like I notice around the ear here, that there's some extra pixels there that I don't want. So I'm just going to use my bracket to minus that selection, get really tight in there. Make sure I'm on B for block by hitting my X, and that'll pull the black to the foreground. And then I can kind of block out some of these pixels. And let's say I accidentally erased too much of her ear. Well, if I change my foreground color back to white by hitting the X or the D, it doesn't matter, either one will switch it. Now when I paint, it will bring back the stuff I deleted. So if you make a mistake, that's a great option for you to go back. That's what makes this so powerful, using the masks. One last thing here to kind of refine my selection. You should notice, okay, so I'm not seeing it up here. Oops, let's throw that over there. You should be able to now pull up the select and mask options, which I'm not seeing. Normally it appears up here. But let's see if we can still find it. So if we go under select, you'll see the select and mask. Like I said, normally it'll appear as just a little bar right here, but right here I've got it still. So under select, go select and mask. And then I get all these options that allow me to kind of refine my selection more. So I'm going to smooth out my selection, which is just kind of smoothing my jagged edges around her chin. I'm going to feather a little bit, which helps blur them. So when I mix them in with another image, that'll help soften them together. And I'll pull up the contrast, which will take that soften, that blur, which was kind of making it a little more white, and darken it a little bit so it doesn't look like I've blurred it as much. I think that looks pretty good for me. If I wanted to go more intense, I could pull the radius up of the edge detection, but I think for the most part, I'm just going to leave it where it is, and I've hit OK. And then we have a great selection there. So I could crop this down, but I'm just going to take this layer. I'm going to click and hold, and then I'm going to drag it and keep, you can't let go yet. You got to keep holding even still. And then, so you'll go from the Rey to the Luke Skywalker, which will pull his image up. And then you're literally, with it still held, and you can see the hand is still holding it, drop it on him. If it didn't work, it's because you didn't hold on long enough and then drop it on top of Luke. So from here, I need to make her smaller. I know that she's really big, so I'm going to zoom out, hit Command T, and I'm going to make her much smaller so that I'm roughly in the ballpark of Luke here. Then I hit Enter or double click to get out of the transfer. I'm going to zoom back in, use my space bar to kind of move this back over, and then see how well I'm lined up here. She looks like she could be a little bit bigger. Maybe just a little bit bigger. So that's probably good enough for right now. And then I could drop the opacity on this layer, and you'll see the word opacity right here. Make sure you get out of the transform by hitting Enter. And then I can kind of see how well I'm lined up. Are the eyes matching up? Are the lips matching up? And that's just this opacity level here, which is dropping her opacity. I think that looks fine, so I'm going to start to just erase some of her to kind of meld the faces together. Once again, you want to be on the mask. So make sure you click on the mask here. Make sure, remember, white is to reveal if I want to bring parts back. Black is to block. So I'm going to hit X to change the foreground to black. Hit B for my brush. Because I want to erase quite a bit of her, I'll make this bigger. And then I'm just going to start erasing, or excuse me, blocking with the mask. And I might even come around the hair a little bit to see if I can meld them a little more. And so if I kind of zoom out a little bit, I could play with this more. You can notice the lips aren't matching up as well. Just to see if I can get it a little bit better. I'm just using my arrow key now. I might need to make it transform her to make her a little bit bigger. But that's kind of one way that you could kind of meld some faces here. So, okay, so we're going to take a look at another technique here really quick to just kind of give you another some more information on how you might go about doing some of this stuff. Let me just delete some of these things, and which it is not letting me do. There we go. Get another crack at this here. So let's say you have an image like this, and you want to, change the background for your project. So essentially what we need to do is kind of what we did with the Star Wars stuff. We need to choose our quick selection tool, and then we need to just make the selection of him. So you'll click and drag up and kind of get a selection of him here. And I'll just do it kind of relatively quickly, and then I'll go back and try to clean it up. So if I zoom in a little bit with my Command plus, hold my space bar down, I can kind of move this around. Now I can kind of clean up this this selection a little bit. So I'm going to pull up the hair a little bit here. Grab that. Oops. So remember the Option key to minus. All right, so that's a little bit better. And remember, you can make this smaller or larger with your right and left brackets. So the tighter selection you want to get, the smaller you want your quick selection tool to be. So just use your left bracket there. Okay, that's looking better. I got a whole chunk here that I don't need. So remember, hold your Option key down and then just drag over the parts that you don't want. There we go. And so I'm going to make this a little smaller. This is still a little rough here. That's better. I want to add back in the beard there. All right, that's pretty good. Okay. Continuing it on here, looking at my selection, this is pretty rough here. So I'm going to hold my Option key down and just kind of try to paint around the shoulder here. And I can see I've got some extra artifacts here, so I'm going to, hold my minus key down and pull all of those out. There we go, looking good. Maybe a little bump there. Bring that in a little tighter. Oops, Command Z that. Option again to minus. Okay, that's better. And I want to get rid of this here, so Option, and then just kind of drag. All right, that looks good. We got to grab this part of the beard here that got left out. There we go. Maybe that too. Missing part of the hair here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, Command minus, and I think I got a pretty decent selection there. So I'm going to go ahead and mask it, which is just right here again. It's the camera down in the corner, right-hand corner. And then I'm going to select and mask to kind of maybe clean that up a little bit. So I'm going to try to smooth out my edges a little bit. Actually, I'm going to cancel that real quick. Yeah, select and mask, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to clean up my edges to smooth out my selection a little bit. It's kind of arbitrary, whichever. You just have to play with it to find out what works with you. I'm going to try to feather this somewhat. There, I feathered it a ton. And as you can see, that's not the effect I'm looking for. So, and that's looking better already. And then I'm going to pull some contrast back in because that feather makes it look really white around my selection. So by pulling up that contrast, it puts some of that white kind of darker. And then I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit OK. So now I have a pretty good selection here, and it's looking pretty decent. So I'm going to go ahead and change the background. So I just downloaded this from Unsplash. I could drag it over, or you can just hit Command A to select all, Command C to copy, Command V to paste, and then you just have to move it to the bottom. And there you go. You've got a completely different background. It looks pretty decent. Now the color of the wall looks a little off, so I'm going to add an adjustment layer to that by simply clicking down here, the half filled in circle. And I'm going to go hue and saturation to change the color, and I'm going to colorize it. And maybe I want to match kind of that color of his sweater. Maybe somewhere in there, maybe a little bit darker. And there we go. Completely different background. If we zoom in a little bit, my selection looks pretty decent, not bad. So one last thing I want to show you here. Say there's, there's another way you can make kind of a quick selection too, and it's called the quick edit mode. But let's say there's something in an image that you just want to kind of change the color. Like for instance here, the water is looking a little weird, or you want to just kind of isolate something really quick in the image and, change the color, or, paste a different thing into it. Essentially, right here in the left-hand corner is the thing called Edit and Quick Mask Mode, which allows you to paint on the selection you want kind of really quickly. So it's right here down in the left-hand corner. So if you click it, and then you choose your B for brush, and then you just start painting. And I'm going to make my brush a little bigger with the square bracket here. I want to make this water a little bit darker. So I'm just going to quickly paint over what I'm looking for. Make sure in your brush too that you have the hardness set to 0. The water looks a little murky here, and here I'm trying to paint this real nice scene, and it looks a little murky for my tastes. So there, I've kind of painted a quick selection. Now if you hit Q, or if you just click on the box again, I'm just going to hit Q. That will take you out of the quick mask mode, and it'll give you the selection that you made. Just kind of a quick selection. I want to change that color of the water. I don't want to get too fancy here. So then I'm going to put an adjustment layer on that selection, go to hue and saturation, and then I'm going to colorize it. And then I want to make that water a little bit more blue. There we go. I don't want to go too much because then it becomes a little obvious, but just a little bit to give it more of a blue flare. If I take that off, you can see that's a big difference, and you can't really see that that I went in there and changed that. So just kind of a subtle way to maybe change a color in an image as well. All right, I hope some of these techniques help you with your assignment.